Hi guys, welcome to my channel Creatively Expressive. My name is Amy, and fun fact, just over 2 years ago today I posted my first video to YouTube, and it was a bee-themed DIYs video. And today, to celebrate that, I have another bee-themed DIYs video to share with you. On my channel I share DIYs, thrift flips, budget decor, and all things creative. So if you enjoy getting creative, I would love it if you would consider subscribing to my channel. And if you do, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I upload a new video. Now let's get creative. For project number 1, I'm using 2 of these signs from the Dollar Tree and this fabric from the Dollar Tree. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the frames from the 2 signs and then take them outside and sand off the pictures. Then I'm going to use STARBOND super glue to glue the 2 signs together, and I have this accelerator spray which speeds up the dry time of the glue. And then to make the sign more sturdy, I'm going to glue a craft stick to the back of the signs. Now I'm going to apply a generous coat of Mod Podge to the top area of the sign, and then apply the bee fabric to the Mod Podged area. Then I'm going to apply Mod Podge to the bottom area of the sign and then cover that area with the fabric. Now I'm going to cut off the excess fabric and then apply another coat of Mod Podge over the top of the fabric. When the Mod Podge has dried, I'm going to use an X-Acto knife to cut the fabric right along the edge of the sign so that I have a clean edge. Now I'm going to use STARBOND super glue to glue the frames back on. I found this little bee sign at Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to use some antique wax to stain it. I'm going to brush it on with a paintbrush and then wipe off the excess with a baby wipe. Then I will use black chalk paint to paint the outside frame. After painting a little bit of that frame, I decided to water down the paint a bit to make the paint go on more smoothly, and then I finished painting the frame. Then I used that same black paint to paint the inner areas of the bee's body and the wings. Now I'm using the color King's Gold to paint the petals on the 2 larger flowers and the center of the smaller flower. Then I am using some watered down white paint to paint the petals on the smaller flower and the centers of the 2 larger flowers. Then I am going to paint the leaves on the flowers with the color moss green. And now to darken up the inner frame, I am going to paint on a coat of antique wax, and I will not wipe any of it off this time. Now I'm going to use STARBOND super glue to glue the bee plaque to the center of the larger sign. And finally, I'm going to glue a little jute twine finger bow over the hole on the little bee plaque, and then this project is complete. For project number 2, I am using 3 of these hexagon signs from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to remove the frames from the fronts of the signs and then flip the signs over, making the fronts of the signs the backs of the signs. I will remove the stickers from the backs of the signs, and now I have a blank canvas to work with. I found 3 different bee printed burlap fabrics at Dollar Tree, and I am going to cover the hexagon signs with them. I cut out a piece of burlap to fit over the sign, and then I'm going to use Mod Podge to attach the burlap to the sign. I covered the sign with a generous layer of Mod Podge, and then I stuck the burlap to it. Now I'm going to add another layer of Mod Podge over the top of the burlap. And when the Mod Podge is mostly dried, I'm going to cut away the rest of the excess burlap. I'm using this burlap with black bees on it for the second sign, and this honeycomb burlap for the third sign. Now I'm taking this little scrap piece of wood that I have that measures about 3 1/4 inches by 3 1/4 inches, and I'm going to paint it with this yellow chalk paint. I love using Silhouette Design Store to find cheap cut files, and I found this cute bee cut file there. I sized the image to fit the little plaque, and then I used my Silhouette Cameo to cut the image out on stencil vinyl. I apply the vinyl to my plaque, and then I'm going to paint over it with a layer of that same yellow chalk paint that I used to paint the plaque to seal the edges of the stencil. Then when the layer of yellow is dry, I will paint over the stencil with a coat of black chalk paint. And now before the black chalk paint is dry, I'm going to carefully peel away the main part of the stencil. When the black paint is dry, I will weed out the smaller pieces of the stencil. I want to cover up the back sides of the signs, so I'm going to use a glue stick and some craft paper to cover the backs of the signs. To clean up the edges of the signs, I'm going to take a finger sander and sand along the edge of the sign, sanding in a downward motion. This will cut the paper along the edge of the sign and leave me with a nice clean edge that is flush with the sign. Now I'm going to use STARBOND super glue to glue the frames back onto the signs. And finally, I will glue that little yellow plaque that I made to the center of the hexagon sign that has the black bees on it. And now this project is complete. For project number 3, I will be using this bee garden stake that I got about a year ago at the Dollar Tree. And I had previously removed the stake from the bee to make it easier to store. For this project, I will also be using this sign that I found at Goodwill for $1.49. The first thing I'm going to do is paint the bee with a couple of coats of white chalk paint. Then I will paint the bee with a couple of coats of chalk paint, which is a light yellow color. To make my next step of painting easier, I'm going to mark the sections of the bee with a pencil. Then I will use black chalk paint to paint the bee's head, legs, and other sections of the bee. And at the bottom of each black section of the bee, I am painting little wispy lines to give the appearance of fuzz or hair like you see on a real bumblebee. And I will also paint the raised areas on the bee's wings with the black paint. At this point, I decided to use some black paint that I had watered down a bit, and this makes the paint glide on easier and makes it a lot easier to paint the fine details of the bee. Now I'm going to cover the sign that I got from Goodwill with this sunflower scrapbook paper that I got from Hobby Lobby. I measure the sign and then I mark and cut down my paper to fit the sign. And then I will attach the paper to the sign with Mod Podge. The way the back of the bee is shaped doesn't make it possible to glue it to the sign. So to fix that, I'm going to glue on some tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree to the back of the bee. I need to cut some of the blocks down to fit on the back of the bee, and my miter shears work great for that. Then I am going to use my STARBOND super glue and some accelerator spray to glue the blocks to the back of the bee. For the last step, I will use that STARBOND super glue to glue the bee to the sign, and then this project is complete. For project number 4, I'm using this sign that I found at Hobby Lobby on clearance. I took it outside and I sanded off the wording. I was trying not to sand any of the frame, but I accidentally did anyway. But that's okay, I will fix it by repainting the frame with black chalk paint. Then I decided to add some de-stressing back to the frame by sanding around the edges of the frame a bit. Now I'm going to tape off the frame with masking tape. And then paint the sign with white chalk paint. For this project, I decided to try printing an image on tissue paper, so I need to measure the sign to see what size I need to make the image. I'd also like to mention that this is my first time trying out this technique, so it involved a little bit of trial and error. So first I tried cutting down and taping a piece of tissue paper to a piece of regular printer paper. And I make sure to cover all of the edges of tissue paper with tape so that none of it gets caught in my printer. And here's where I found out that regular printer paper, at least for me, doesn't work. Upon getting sucked into the printer, it immediately got caught in my printer and wrinkled all up. I really wanted this to work though, so now I'm trying to tape the tissue paper to a piece of cardstock. And this time it worked out great. Also, I found these images on Etsy, and I will be sure to include a link in the description box so that you can find them. For the next step, I am going to paint on a layer of Mod Podge over my sign. And then I let it dry completely. Now I'm going to take the tissue paper off the cardstock. Then from what I've seen, it's a good idea to wet the tissue paper with a small paintbrush around the design and tear away the excess tissue paper, creating an uneven line around the design, which is supposed to make it blend in with the sign better. So that's what I'm going to do. Then I will place the design on my sign, and I'm going to adhere it to the sign using a small heat press. And using the heat over the Mod Podge reactivates the Mod Podge and makes the tissue paper stick to it. And this method is supposed to be better for decreasing wrinkles in the paper. And it did do that, and I liked how easy it was to do. And I am working from the center of the image out towards the edges. And I'm using this HTV Ront heat press that I got from Amazon, and I will include a link to it in the description box below. Now I'm going to apply another layer of Mod Podge to the top of the tissue paper, and I am working from the center of the image to the outside edges. And though the dry Mod Podge method worked great to prevent wrinkles when sticking the image on, at this point the tissue paper wrinkles on me. So once the top layer of Mod Podge dried, I decided to try placing a piece of parchment paper over my sign and running the heat press over the image again, and this helped a lot with getting rid of the wrinkles. I thought I was going to be done with the project at this point, but I thought there was too much blank space on the sign. So then I cut out some hexagon shapes on stencil vinyl, and I'm going to apply them to the corners of my sign. After applying the stencils to all four corners, I realized that the hexagons are going in the same direction in all corners except for the first one that I did. So I'm going to remove the stencils from that corner and reposition them to go in the same direction as the other three. Now I'm going to take a fine detailed paintbrush and I'm painting black chalk paint over the lines in between the stencils. And make sure you don't paint all the way out to the edges of the stencil where they don't create a complete hexagon shape. Then at this point, I decided I didn't like the way the distressed frame looked with this picture, so I decided to paint over the areas that I had previously distressed. And once I have painted over all of the stencils and removed them, this project is complete. And here are my final thoughts on this technique. I love being able to easily add such a complex design to a sign, but I'm not crazy about how the edges of the tissue paper look on the sign. From far away you can't see the edge of the tissue paper, but close up you can, and that kind of bothers me. I'm kind of a perfectionist. Overall though, I do like this technique, and I will display the sign in my house. For project number 5, I am using these hanging hexagon canvases that I found at Goodwill. But I would also like to mention that I saw these same canvases at Five Below for not much more than I paid for them at Goodwill. For this project, I am going to be using the same tissue paper printing technique, so I'm measuring the canvases to see what size I need to print the images. Then I am taping the tissue paper to the cardstock and I will print out 2 images, one for each canvas. The canvases had some images printed on them, so I'm going to paint over those with some white chalk paint. And I ended up taking the 2 canvases apart to make painting them easier. Now I'm going to cover each canvas with a layer of Mod Podge and let them dry completely. Then I will take my first image off the cardstock and place it on the first canvas. This time I decided to not use the paintbrush method to remove the paper around the edge of the image. I am just going to cover the entire canvas with the tissue paper. So I place the image on the canvas and then I press the heat press in the center of the image to get it to stick in place. Then I will continue to press the image on, working from the center out to the edges. And here I'm just showing you that I didn't remove the jute twine from the bottom canvas. I just taped it to the inside of the canvas so that it would stay out of my way. So now I'm just pressing my second image to my second canvas. Now to remove the excess tissue paper from the canvases, I am just going to take my finger sander and sand along the edges of the canvases in a downward motion, and that will cleanly tear away the excess tissue paper. Now that I have both canvases covered with my images, I am going to add a top coat of Mod Podge to each one. And it wrinkles a bit on me again, but this time I don't mind it so much because the entire thing has wrinkles, so it just looks like texture that's supposed to be there, as opposed to it only being wrinkled in one area, which I thought looked odd. Then I just stapled the canvases back together and this project is complete. So after trying the technique 2 different ways, I definitely prefer the method of covering the entire surface with the tissue paper over the method of tearing the tissue paper around the image. Let me know if you have ever tried this technique and what is your favorite method of doing it. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed the DIYs, and if you did, please show me some love by subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, giving me a thumbs up, commenting, and sharing this video with anyone that you think might enjoy it. Your feedback really helps out my channel so that I can keep bringing you more ideas. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!
At night when there isn't anybody around.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Ah!
No, of course not. Why should I?
How the hell did you do that?
Oh, thank you. See, I just had a thought. Now maybe you can help us. Me? Yes, help us stage this. Good.
It was open and I didn't know it was open and I shook it.
They got a mustache. You got all in your hair.
Why this empty back?
My craft.
Where'd the lid go?